told me that during the pandemic, when we were so worried about people getting food, my friend said, "Oh, we can just take food to this community refrigerator and put things on their pantry shelves, and the people who need the food can just come anytime and take it." So we did that. And then another friend of mine told me that you can have a little composting bucket in your house, and community resources will come and give you a clean bucket every week or so and take all your little extra food and then bring you once a year or something. They'll bring you some compost. And then I just happened to be watching PBS one day when you were being interviewed, and I was just amazed at all the other things that you people are doing. It's just overwhelming how many good things you're doing to help young people, to preserve Mother Nature, to help the planet, to help people who need food, teaching, and so it's just amazing. And I'm so glad that you're going to talk to us about it today. So thank you very much for being here.
And I'll just add that very quickly that we will take questions at the end. And so we'll just turn it over now to Juliana.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. And I just first wanted to thank you all for the work you all do. I know I care a lot about being an educated and informed voter, and I don't have the time to do all my own research because I'm a working mom of young kids. And so every time I go to the polls, I'm on your website, and I'm just really appreciative of everything you do to, you know, to support democracy, really, and make it accessible for, you know, for everyone. So I just really appreciate that, and it's my honor to get to speak with you today. And please do feel free, you know, to pop a question in the chat to help remember or whatever. We've got, you know, time together today to talk about lots of exciting things, and I'm excited about that. The first thing that I wanted to talk about, and then you won't just have to look at my face the whole time. I've got some slides and some video to share with you. But I just wanted to start with this idea of regenerative agriculture. And that's kind of a buzz phrase, you know, in the world that I work in. But of course, if you're not involved with farming, you might not have heard that phrase before. So I wanted to start with a definition. You've probably heard sustainable agriculture or organic agriculture, and like what are the differences between these things? Conventional agriculture, right? So regenerative is really just based on the principle that we're kind of past the point of sustaining our planet. Like, we don't want to sustain where we're at. We want to make it better. Right. And so with regenerative agriculture, it's not just about maintenance, but it's about how can I make sure that the soil this year is going to be better next year, and that in 5 generations, this farmland is going to be even better, rather than if we think of like conventional monocrop agriculture. I grew up in the Midwest surrounded by that. You know, that singular crop is taking all of the same nutrients every year, and then the chemical fertilizers are killing the microorganisms, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll talk about sort of why all that's important, and precisely how important it is, because I think that's another thing that not everyone realizes is how amazingly powerful regenerative land management is in the climate change story. The other thing that I think is really important to acknowledge about regenerative agriculture is that most of these principles are indigenous principles. It's not new technology. It's old. And to just really give credit and gratitude to all of the indigenous farmers and land stewards that have been caring for this land for thousands of years. And you know, and just really leading the way and protecting the planet. And with that, I'd love to give a little bit of land history, and then I'm going to start showing you pretty pictures. So if you've been down to Reunity Resources, or as Stephanie said, until about 3 years ago, it was operated under the name Santa Fe Community Farm. We are west on Agua Fria, past Siler Road. You go about 2 stop signs, or if you're familiar with Plants of the Southwest, we're just the next stop sign past Plants of the Southwest. And you turn right down San Isidro Crossing, and you cross the usually dry river, and there we are on your right. So we're in the traditional village of Agua Fria. And this land has at least 7,000 years of agricultural history to it. Archaeologists have studied this neighborhood and found like full kivas, full plazas, house dwellings that indicate that the Tewa people, after being nomadic since time immemorial, settled here in about 5000 BCE. And they probably settled because of the river valley, this beautiful alluvial plain and consistent water source that allowed them to transition from hunter-gatherer living into agricultural living. And there was also tons of evidence of the domestication of the turkey as part of that transition to a more sedentary life. So I have yet to see it for my own eyes, because I guess these digs, you know, they were funded for a time period and now they're closed off and on private land. But it sounds like a really incredible historical archaeological site in this area in different pueblos. There's a little road off of Agua Fria called Pueblo Quemado is the name of the road. And that was also the name that archaeologists gave to this pueblo, or that the Spanish, when the conquistadors came through and settled here, gave to that pueblo, because the mud and their pottery was dark. Quemado means burnt. And so that little micro community was known for their darker pottery and called the Burnt Pueblo. In any case, I just think it's astounding and humbling and a deep responsibility to realize the layers of history and community that this land has held. And so after the Tewa people lived here until about the 1200s. And then this is the same time that Chaco Canyon was abandoned. And so probably due to massive regional drought, the people abandoned this place as well and relocated to what we now call Tasuke, Powake, Nambe, and what we kind of think of as like Tewa homelands. But of course, everywhere is Tewa homelands. And then a couple hundred years later, the conquistadors came through, and coming up El Camino Real through Las Golondrinas as a hitching post, if you've ever been out there, and up from there, up, Agua Fria Road, really, they could see how the land had been lived on and how food had been grown here. And so Spanish farmers also settled here in that sort of early colonial Santa Fe time period. And Agua Fria village became the breadbasket for colonial Santa Fe. So we joke that we do the same thing now when we go to the farmer's market on Saturdays, that the food was grown here and then packed up. Back then they did it on burro carts and would ride up to the palace of the governors to sell food and trade goods. So deep indigenous history. And then since the 1400s, Spanish colonial history here. And then, the big fast forward, 500 years, the owners before we were here, who operated this as the Santa Fe Community Farm, also have a beautiful story. It was a man named John Stevenson, who was 100 years old when I met him. And had a few more years in him. But he was a World War II vet, and 3 times his troops were split, this half on this boat, this half on that boat. And 3 times half of his platoon was killed and 3 times he was spared. And so when he returned from the war, he felt like he was spared for a reason and that he wanted to do something purposeful with his life. he bought this land with his wife, raised his family here, and operated it on this principle of donating food to those in need. There are still old timers in the neighborhood who talk about, oh, I used to come here and pick apples, and oh, he would give us a wagon and a nickel and say, bring this wagon of food down the street and give it away. Like really nice stuff. So, really since the late 40s, this land has been operating as a neighborhood breadbasket. And when we met him, when he was 100, our proposition, we had already started our composting operation, and we're looking for some land to grow that on. And a friend suggested we meet with him. And he said, yes, like here's an acre of land we can lease you. This is perfect. It's the golden circle, he called it, right? Collecting food waste to turn into compost, to feed the soil, to grow more food. And so we started leasing land from him then. And then when he passed, of course, if you're in your early hundreds, your children are in their 70s, they weren't ready to take on the farming and kind of reinvigorate it. And we just said, well, we've been here a couple of years, we see and feel a relationship with the land, and if it could be so, we would love to carry on and really reinvigorate that the neighborhood breadbasket, and just like a nexus of intersectional gatherings and learning and growing together. So that's the long, short 7,000-year history of this land. And just that we feel a lot of gratitude for everyone who came before to protect this land and to steward it, and a big responsibility in what's possible for our community and for the future. And so I'm just glad to be here to talk all about it. I'm going to do a little screen sharing. I guess maybe that's a natural, are there any questions so far? Feel free to just, put them in the chat or speak up, I guess.
I guess we can't see. Yeah.
Right. Maybe you have to type it into either the chat or the Q&A box, but please feel free to do that as we go. I'm really happy to answer questions always. And then I'll get my screen share going. There it is. Okay, you seeing my presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Great. View slideshow. Yay, so then here's a little bit about Reunity resources. This is our food swoosh, where you see the food waste at one end turning into soil and back into vegetables. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a zero waste mission. It's our goal, and the name originally came from the word reunite. How do we reunite our waste streams with value for our community? So our biggest program is that we collect food waste from area schools and restaurants to the tune of 2 million pounds a year from schools, restaurants, and households that we're diverting from the landfill. And then we have a simple compost system, which I hope you all come down and take a tour this summer, that creates a high nutrient compost. And now, I see this is an old slide I took. This is, now we've been doing it for 3 years to operate a community farm. So we use that compost on the farm here. We also sell it to other farmers and gardeners. We, it goes into school gardens. It goes into our sort of community compost and gardening projects as well. So a quick visual about your food's journey. Is that, it's here starting at the top. This is at the Santa Fe Indian School, and also a pre-pandemic photo because you can see faces. And so we collect in food waste in 26 cafeterias in town. And so we always encourage everyone first, obviously, when it comes to food, the best thing to do is eat it. Eat the right amount of food for your body, nourish yourself. And we often talk about kind of a hierarchy. So the goal sometimes, like which school is going to have the most compost or like be the best. Like actually the best success would be zero, like zero waste, all the food's getting eaten. But we know that's not the case. And so we say, feed people, feed animals, compost, and then worst case scenario, landfill. But here's the loop. So there's the cafeteria, and then moving around to the right, they collected indoors in small bins, and it goes to big bins out back. Our simple truck, two amazing people drive around and collect all of those bins. It's real low tech, which is also what I love about it, is that composting is really accessible and is a replicable global solution that this can happen in small communities, in rural communities. You don't need a $2 billion infrastructure investment to get started. Here's our compost yard at night. We make piles with the food waste and wood waste, which we get from Buckman Road. So anytime a forest thinning project or a tree trimming is happening, those landscapers bring all the wood waste up to Buckman, where they have a big grinder, and we get the already chipped wood from them to mix in with our food waste to make compost. Then during the composting process, which going to talk about everything. You're going to know so much about this by the time we're done. But in about a 90-day process, we turn that food waste into nutrient-rich compost. And then that goes back into hoop houses, onto the fields, and out into the community to regenerate the soil. Are we going to do this? I think we're going to do this. This is a video. You guys can weigh in on my hair if I should grow it out again. That explains really concisely the soil science and why composting is important. So I'm going to just go ahead and play it because it's, it's well rehearsed rather than me ad-libbing it again right now. We're getting video and everything, audio.
Change and the damage we're doing to our planet? We did. And that's why here at Reunity Resources, we collect food scraps from schools and restaurants and turn them into compost in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You probably know that compost can help your farm or garden, but can anything we do really help fight climate change? We'd like to share a new way of looking at this problem. You see, climate change is all about too much carbon up in our atmosphere. Carbon isn't the problem. Everything alive is made of carbon. It's us. The problem and the solution are simply a matter of balance. Let's step back and look at the 5 pools where carbon is stored on planet Earth. Starting about 500 million years ago, when plants came onto land, carbon began to cycle in an amazing balance between these pools, a balance that allowed for life as we know it to evolve. Then one life form, us, figured out how to extract carbon from the fossil pool. We've been burning it for energy, putting it into play, and disrupting the balance. The way we manage land and do agriculture is moving even more carbon from the soil and biosphere up into the atmosphere. Specifically, we've moved 880 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is heating up the planet and destabilizing our climate. Now the oceans have absorbed a lot of this excess carbon, which is resulting in ocean acidification and accelerating a mass extinction of sea life. So, in order to save life as we know it, of course we have to stop releasing fossil carbon. But the big question is, where do we put this excess carbon to get the cycle back into balance? The solution is literally at our fingertips. It's our soil. When I was in 3rd grade, I actually invented a special vacuum that would just suck up all of the air pollution, churn it around, and then with a flip of a simple toggle switch, blow it back into the earth as fertilizer. What I didn't know at the time is that this technology actually exists, courtesy of Mother Nature herself. Here's how. Plants, with sunlight and water, perform photosynthesis. They pull carbon in from the air and turn it into carbohydrates, sugars. Then they pump some of these sugars down through their roots to feed microorganisms who use that carbon to build soil. Voila! Carbon moved. The plants pump it in, and the soil stores it. Nature's living technology is amazing. Scientists have recently discovered that applying a thin layer of compost one time sets up an ongoing positive feedback loop that brings more and more carbon into the soil each year. In concert with other regenerative practices, like not tilling the soil, planting trees and cover crops, and planned grazing, we can build and retain gigatons of soil carbon. This is carbon farming. This is regenerative agriculture. Unlike carbon in the atmosphere, more carbon in the ground is good for us. It makes healthy soil, which is nutrient rich, full of life, and holds way more water. This means more nutritious food and crops that are more resilient in the face of drought. That's good news for farmers, families, and anyone that eats. Remember this, the choices you make, from where your food comes from to what you do when you're done with it, from the fuel you choose to the businesses you support, either puts more carbon up in the atmosphere or pulls it down into the ground. Our health, the health of our soils, and the health of our planet are one and the same. Please look for locally grown compost in your community. The regeneration of our soils is the task of our generation, and there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So that was your quick science lesson of the day. And now that we've done 7,000 years of history and a quick science lesson, what should we do next? Math, language arts. We're going to talk a little bit more about compost. And again, feel free to pop questions into that Q&A or chat anytime. So compost, to kind of summarize, when anything that used to be alive, like when we use the word organic here, we're not talking about like a certified USDA organic apple. We just mean anything made of carbon, anything alive. When it goes to the landfill, it's going to decay, right? This is what happened. Like without human involvement, everything is going to decay one way or another. When things are like wrapped in plastic and not managed properly, they stink when they decay. It's not lovely. And that stink means that it's an anaerobic process, which means without oxygen, right? Aerobic exercise with oxygen, anaerobic without oxygen. And when an anaerobic process is happening, it's producing methane and nitrous oxide, which are really horrific greenhouse gases. They warm the planet way faster than carbon dioxide. So we don't want that. We don't want all of that living material, again, whether it's apples or leaves, going to the landfill. We want to manage that decay process so that instead of decaying, it's composting. Because also here in the desert, I don't know if any of you garden, but it is awfully hard to grow things in clay and sand. So we lose this opportunity. Here's that reunite piece of our mission, that if we're just throwing it away, first of all, where is away? You know, our planet's a closed system too. And second of all, we really need that. We need that organic matter in our soils here in the desert. So we have our doorstep compost program, as Danis mentioned, where we give you a little 4-gallon bucket that you can keep in your kitchen or on your, you know, in your garage, wherever works for you, and put everything that used to be alive in it. And we collect it once a week, bring it back here and compost it. And then, as she said, deliver you compost once or twice a year, depending on your subscription. So yeah, what happens here? We're collecting about 2 million pounds a year, and we build these things called aerated static piles. and we manage the temperature and moisture. So it's not that our process is more difficult than going to the landfill, right? It's just different. We're mixing it with that wood waste. We're managing the moisture and the airflow. And then if you come down, most people are amazed when they take a tour, like you're surrounded by tens of thousands of food waste and it doesn't really stink. Um, because it's composting aerobically, right, with the healthy microorganisms that are being fed by that oxygen and moisture. And these piles on the inside of them are a minimum of 131 degrees for 30 days. So they cook, and that's what we call it. We cook the compost for a month. And that's important to know as a, I don't know, as a citizen scientist or consumer or gardener. We've just been in a 2-year cycle of caring more about germs than we ever would have wanted to care about germs. Well, 131 degrees kills any pathogens. It also kills weed seeds, so that if we're collecting, garden waste, we don't, we would hate to bring a truckload of compost filled with weed seeds to a piece of land. And so knowing that first cooking process handles all of that kind of food safety and garden safety. And then it cures for 60 days where it's gradually cooling down and different microorganisms proliferate at different temperature levels, just naturally. So that's where like beautiful symbiotic bacterial and fungal relationships start forming in the compost. And then we screen it out, which is basically like a big sandbox sifter at the end of the process. And we end up with a kind of our fine finished compost and then a bigger mulch product. And then any stuff that's still bigger than that goes back into the process and goes through the cycle again until it's small enough to either be finished compost or finished mulch. So here's our site. And then here's some of so that's composting. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. It's possible for me to do that. So let's talk about compost for a second. Does anybody have questions about how it works, why it matters, how they can get involved? Beyond the doorstep program, we also have a drop-off site here. So if we're in your neighborhood or in your kind of usual commute route, right outside of our gate, it's available 24/7, just like the community fridge that Janice also mentioned. You can also drop your food waste off here. Yeah, any questions about compost? Great, then we will start talking about farming and what happens when we apply that compost. So first of all, it's nearly impossible to grow things in clay or sand. You wouldn't grow a garden in your sandbox. So first of all, just the fact that amending the soil makes it possible to grow here is great. But beyond that, really the quantifiable impact of just a little bit of compost is incredible, because not only is it bringing in all of this, we call it the soil food web, all of this microorganism health, which ultimately becomes the immune system for your healthy plants and helps your plants take up more nutrition from the soil. It also holds water, which is really important here. So rather than, if we tend to have an all or nothing heavy monsoons, we have to worry about flash flooding. Uh-oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Can you all hear me? Is it okay? Okay, thanks. So when that flash flood comes on clay, it's going to run off, right, like a slide. And it's going to, if we have any topsoil, it's going to carry it down into the arroyos, into the rivers, and it's gone. And when we have pure sand, it just filters straight through, whoosh, and there's not a chance for our roots to hold it and uptake it. But when we amend soil with compost, it acts as both a filter and a sponge. So it slows that water flow, holds it near the roots, and and helps our not only our soil not to erode, but also our water to not just flow through and be lost down the arroyo, but to really stay in the water table where we are and help us grow what we want. So that is major benefits. Let me get the right presentation shared again here, and I'll show you more pretty pictures. Da-da-da. So we grow mostly, you're seeing some high tunnel photos here. We've got a couple, which is just sort of the technical term for this type of greenhouse, where it's just like basically a plastic cover. It's not a big glass greenhouse like you might imagine. So we've got a couple of high tunnels that help us extend the season, since we're prone, just like we had that amazing weekend weather and now it's winter again today. That we have these fluctuations, but that a little bit of protection and insulation can really help us expand our growing season. And service groups, this group in the bottom left is a, I guess I don't have my big view on, is a group from the School for the Deaf. There we are. I think kids to get their hands in the soil is one of the best things we can do, and the amount of excitement that we see in kids when they're able to participate in the food cycle, like you just can't imagine how excited kids are to eat radishes and carrots that they've pulled out of the ground themselves. And the kind of triumph around it is amazing. Last year, for the first time, we started a farm camp for kids ages 5 to 10. And I just still can't believe how much of a hit it was. But every week we had a day that we called salad party. And the kids were just like, looking forward to it, celebrating it. They would make the dressing, and we would make croutons with herbs from the farm and pick the lettuce and whatever was in season, right? Pick it, wash it, prepare it, serve it. And they were just like, salad party. Whereas that, it was a major feedback point from parents, is like the kids tried so many foods that they'd never been able to convince them to try before, because they planted the seed, they saw it grow, they washed the soil off of it, all of that. So that's exciting, to be able to not only be farming, but sharing farming with the next generation. Because in the course of one generation, the United States went from 1 in 4 people being farmers, right, 25%, to 1 in 100. So farmers are a dying breed, and yet there are ever more people on the planet who need to eat and need to eat well. And so solving this imbalance is a big issue. This picture is my intro into one of the ways that we're looking at that. So beyond growing food here, doing field trips, doing a farm camp, and donating a huge amount of the food we grow, we're also working with a couple of other local organizations. And we find collaborations to be really a place of power and actual solution. That I think the idea that any organization or individual needs to do everything is flawed. We can't. But when we can look to others and say, wow, like that's really your strength. So one of our longtime partners is YouthWorks. Their strength is really supporting youth who have had really tough lives. And our strength is really agriculture. And so when we come together, we can be really supporting youth through agriculture, and it's beautiful. So this is like day one on some land across the river from our site. So also if you're driving down Agua Fria, you'll see it. And this is county-owned land that in the beginning of the pandemic, we had so many people calling us saying, can you donate more food? Can you grow more food? Like this is a panic situation, right? The grocery store shelves are bare. What if, how long will this last? What if? I said, of course, like we're going to donate and grow as much as we possibly can this year. But can this also be our wake-up call that a 1.5 acre farm and obviously there are lots of other farms in the area if you've been to the farmers market, but even with all the farms we have, it's not enough farm to feed all of the people that live here. I said, well, we need to work on transitioning more land into arable land and exposing people to farming in a way that's exciting, that could be economically sustainable, because certainly where I grew up, most farm families, this was in in rural Minnesota, big corn and soybean country. And most of my farmer family friends, the only message they heard from their parents was, get out of town and go to college. Don't be a farmer, because the economic stresses of it and the weather related uncertainties, that it's like you can invest everything in March, April, May, June, and then you can have a hailstorm in July and lose it all. And so it's like finding a way for farming to be secure and responsible for the people doing it too is a big hurdle. So anyways, we're working with YouthWorks. We're also working with a couple of other local organizations. Alas de Agua is an art collective, and Three Sisters Collective, also arts and activism, and really bringing young people and bringing Indigenous people and people of color to the land, because especially Indigenous and people of color have a really traumatized history with land management because of slavery, because of migrant farming, etc. So to really start to find ways to connect that feel supportive and not extractive, that it's fun and it's not, the thing your parents told you not to do. Is really a long healing journey in our country. So this piece of county land used to be a gravel quarry, really premium farming here, which I think is part of what makes it so magical. This first day and this first really, we're all sitting out there with these steel digging rods, dig holes. And it was hard. It took, it's like it was that hard packed caliche clay before we could even be bringing in compost and water and getting started. So this community project has hosted agricultural training, construction training, land management training, poetry readings, public art workshops, Indigenous knowledge sharing events, really like beautiful layers of learning happening here. This is an off-grid solar water system that we were able to fundraise for and install because there's no water access over there. And these kids, I mean, to see them go from like, oh my gosh, we're digging holes in a former gravel pit, and it's going to be a farm, like question mark. But to see their investment and their pride, and that really they just talk about it as their farm, like, well, how's our farm doing? What's happening? And here are some of the events happening there. Last year, we had a big land blessing led by the Indigenous groups involved, and just lots of community layers, bringing love to this land that was, just neglected. And we hope that this is a replicable model, is what we're always looking for, is the point for us as an organization. Everything we do is hyper localized and super community focused. The point is never to try to become like the Coca-Cola of compost, because that's not how it works. And that's not what's needed, but rather to educate and share knowledge and say, this is a functional model, and there could be one of these every 50 miles. Or there could be 10 of these, that the collecting of food waste shouldn't really go beyond 50 miles. Because if you're driving that heavy stuff that far, you're kind of counteracting the environmental good that it's doing. So we hope the same for this Full Circle Farm project, that this idea of a multi-organization collaboration on public lands could be really replicated throughout Santa Fe County and everywhere. This is an overhead view. Look at all those holes we dug. Oh my gosh. After we dug about 200 holes, then we were like, does anybody know somebody with a backhoe? And so then a friend with a backhoe came in and dug these long horizontal beds to balance our back pain out. But you can see the little green starts, and then let's see, okay, water and land, I kind of have already talked about this, so I'm gonna just skip. But here's what some snapshots of it middle of the season last year, from a gravel pit to like really lots of biodiversity, lots of green, lots of food coming out of there, also going into our food. So food from Full Circle, as well as food from our farm, we donate to the YouthWorks culinary program, where they incorporate it into hot meals for those in need. We have the community fridge out front, which is a 24/7 food access point. No questions asked. Take what you need, leave what you can. And then we also do bulk food donations with the Santa Fe Indigenous Center, Many Mothers, and Santa Fe Public Schools Adelante program. Each of those organizations have between 50 and 80 families that they serve each week with food staples, hygiene staples, whatever the case may be, diapers in the case of Many Mothers. And during the season, we come in and add fresh foods to those donations, since most of what they're otherwise able to give are dry goods, like pasta, beans, etc. And then we also, for our farm stand on site, we're open May through October, and we've also been donating farm cards. Is one of our, it's basically like a rechargeable gift card for our farm stand. We've also been donating farm cards to these organizations to distribute to their families, so that the people they serve can come down and choose the foods that they want, have an experience with their families on the farm, and really have the agency and the dignity that we all want when it comes to our foods. Here's just some food donation images. So here's a box we were making for Many Mothers families, and depending on fundraising and grants and things, obviously we don't grow butter or black beans on the farm, but it's nice, or eggs, but it's nice if we have the funding to round out those boxes with staples that they can use, and proteins too. Food donations, food donations. There we are. Gonna stop that share for a moment. Okay, so now, are there any questions on that much? Now I'm going to tell you more about what we're doing this year and how you can participate. Yay! So we on site have worked to become a community gathering space, not only for farm camp and for field trip groups, etc., but just for the public. We're changing our open hours and expanding them a little bit this year. So starting April 30th, we're going to have a seedling sale if you're a gardener. That's a Saturday morning. Beautiful seedlings, and probably our first produce of the year as well. And then from there, we'll probably start with some weekends. But once we hit June, we'll be open Thursday through Sunday. And we have the farm stand on site, which is expanding from being just a farm stand with produce and a few other, like last year we had honey and beef and local dairy and eggs. This year we're really expanding to have a local everything store is our goal. We'll see how close we get to everything this year, but a pretty wide array of locally produced goods that you can find here, again, Thursdays through Sundays this summer. We also have a food truck on site with farm to table yumminess. So you can come down and have a meal here, bring your friends. We've got a really epic tree swing if you have young people in your life, or if you like tree swings. And then we have a whole event series. So in the evenings, we have concerts happening, all outdoors, which was really a boon. Obviously, last year was the first year that we had the infrastructure to start doing this. And everybody just really was celebrating that they could come, be outdoors, feel pandemic safe, and still have a community sense. And that idea of going to a concert, sharing a meal with friends, being around a bonfire, but to not have the pandemic anxiety. So we'll be continuing that with a series of music events, also cooking classes, and more kind of intellectual, like a lecture series, I guess is what we should call it. Fireside chats. Lots of ways to get involved. If you like to do things, we do a lot of volunteer groups. So you can drop in as an individual. There's a page on our website, which I can plop a link into the chat here at the end, to just sign up as a volunteer. Definitely farm side is where we do a lot of volunteering, but that doesn't mean you need to be like on your hands and knees in the soil. It could be like, let's plant seeds in a greenhouse, or it's not necessarily heavy labor, though it can be if that's your thing. We also, the community fridge is completely volunteer cared for. So if you're passionate about food security, that's a great place to come in. And there's a core of maybe 5 volunteers now, who check on it, make sure that it's clean and stocked, who are making connections with restaurants and saying, oh yeah, you usually have leftovers on Friday nights that you can pack up. Great, I can come over at, Fridays at 7 and drop things in the fridge, or whatever it is. That's another way to get involved. Joining the compost program is a great way to get involved. And also on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. Like, I can't even think of all the ways yet. If you have young people in your life, farm camp is super fun, and I'm not at all biased. So let me just put the website into chat here, and then you'll see on there the menu of volunteering, farm camp, doorstep compost, all of that. Are there any questions? You said something about manure. That's a good question. I will need to double check. I love the horse shelter, and we work with Jennifer and Martine. Jennifer Rios is one very involved person with the horse shelter. We work with them collecting food waste from their restaurant. I'm not sure if their manure is coming here, because I'm not the one who tracks where it's all coming from, but we do get it from a lot of different horse owners and stables. And that's another, beyond the food waste, just another service we offer is to turn that horse manure into good soil amendment as well. Other questions so far? Wonderful. Yeah, I hope to see you all in the spring. Do join the newsletter. Stay tuned. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. Maybe I have another a 4-minute video that a great local photographer, Esha Chiochio, and radio, I don't know, do you call a radio personality, radio host, Mary Charlotte Domandi, did this great video series that focuses more on the farming and the community element rather than the science lesson. So I will just pop that video on, and if more questions come up, I'm here. And here we go. Technology. Share. Okay. Dun, dun. Make it big. Here we go.
Fellowship.
But I don't want to be there. I want to be here.
This farm, in its iteration as a community farm, was purchased by a World War II vet in 1947. And this man, John Stevenson was his name, is kind of a local legend. He came back and decided to devote his life and his land to growing food for donation to the hungry. When we first began to lease a corner of the land, we met with him. He was already 100 at the time. I remember bringing our babies in, and he was just delighted. And he was so happy to have us join the project in the land. He called it the Golden Circle. The food waste becomes the compost, and that was like a major part of our original lease, was providing compost to the land. We have the capacity that we think we can carry on the farm and the mission of providing food to the hungry. And so we were able to receive that torch from that community farm legend. There are actually over 70 varieties being grown on the farm this year. So that biodiversity is keeping pest control manageable, keeping weed control, building soil, and the perimeter of the fields really focus on biodiversity and permaculture design.
We apply compost and worm compost basically on any row that we're going to be planting. The vegetables themselves are taking the nutrients and minerals out of the soil, but the compost that we're putting back into it is keeping it so it's always alive and always very nutrient dense.
We use seeds that are adapted to this climate, and we have inherited seeds that have been saved from this land. And I think the miracle of a seed is not to be underestimated. We have a bi-weekly farm stand, and it's our goal to just create an access point right here in Aqua Village, kind of on the south side of the county, and making sure that fresh, healthy food's accessible right to our neighborhood and anyone else who wants to come down and just experience the farm. We've opened up our outdoor space to a farm-to-table food truck called Rose's Kitchen. This feels like a way that kind of community food and fellowship can happen in a safe way.
We launched a doorstep compost collection service earlier in the spring, right when the pandemic was happening. So that's a way in order to be able to get people involved in the compost process and in sustainability.
Ultimately, composting is just sort of a collaboration with nature, like everything's going to decay. And so we're just kind of managing this natural process. We're firm believers in the small, local, adaptable, and agile model. In response to all the food insecurity that came with the COVID pandemic this spring, we launched a collaboration with a number of other nonprofits and the county government. How can we figure out how to grow more food, right? There were major disruptions in the food supply chain, and people were alarmed this spring. So the idea that we needed a more secure, more localized food system right now was really alive for people. And that opened the door with our county commissioner. Her name is Anna Hansen, and she comes to the farm stand regularly. So we said, Commissioner Hansen, we'd love to be able to grow more food. Is there any county land that we could work on? All of these partners have now gone through the whole process of taking a piece of desertified land. I mean, clay. We're out there with pickaxes trying to, find a piece of forgiveness, and then bringing in compost. Over the winter, we're cover cropping so that we're really building that soil. 5 years from now, it will be this lush and abundant place that people are gathering. I think there's this kind of capitalist patriarchal separatism of like, I'm in my silo and there's only enough resources for me. One of the most important things we can do is elevate and amplify each other's strengths. And so it's always been our goal as an organization to kind of know what we do and know how it works well with others. YouthWorks comes to work here. We donate food to the YouthWorks culinary program to make meals. This spring, we were connecting together with different food donation programs in that way as well. And we all lift each other up. And I think that mutual respect shows up in the plants, in the trees, in the way that it feels to walk around the farm, that we're all in this together.
Oh,
There we
I think there was a
go.
question in the chat
I
about,
see that. What kinds of interactions do you have with local governments? Could local government support be improved? Yes, is the short answer to that. But ultimately, we have lots of interactions with local government, and I think that in and of itself is something that I don't take for granted. I don't think every local government is as responsive and interested as ours. So I feel really grateful that we have relationships with the city. When we first started our compost program, our commercial compost program in 2014, we had first we were told we couldn't do it by the city. There's an ordinance that says basically the city's in charge of the trash, and that makes sense from a systemic level. You don't want to have 27 trash trucks collecting, around town, and what if one person doesn't show up? And so that, like, in our city, that's a government service, and in the ordinance, food scraps was listed in the definition of trash. And so they were like, so you can't do it. Really? We can't? Because there's clearly a need and an opportunity here. But from that initial, like, no, you can't, we kept building a relationship. This is a person who's now retired. Her name was Cindy Padilla, and she was the solid waste and Department of the Environment director. And we just kind of kept at it and said, well, what about, could we do this? Could we do that? Could we change the ordinance? And she said, well, how about, like, you could change the ordinance, but I'm about to retire and it might take 3 years, and let's just try to get this done. I can see you're not going to give up. And so she said, well, the city can put out an RFP, which is a request for proposals. And then any company that wants to fulfill it can apply. So there's no, I can't guarantee it'll be you who are selected, but we put out an RFP to start collecting commercial food waste, and provide all of that data to the city so that we can be analyzing our long-term impact, our waste audits, et cetera. And so that was like a very positive relationship building experience. She put out that RFP. We were an applicant, we were chosen. And so then we were able to do that. So we've shared all of our data with them. Like, we have a very positive relationship with the environment department and the city solid waste folks. I think when we first started, we were taking every single truck out to Caja del Rio to drive it over the scales so that we could start getting data. Well, how heavy are these carts? Turns out they're approximately 290 pounds. Yikes. On average. Those are the big, it's like your city trash cart. If that was filled with all food waste, it's almost 300 pounds. Which is also, like, to the point of impact of what's getting, taken out of the landfill is, it's like, that's a lot. And most households, your trash is up to 40% compostable. So the impact you see in your own trash can when you divert it is really huge. So really positive relationship with the city. Same, we've met with, we've met with the mayor, we've met with all kinds of different departments of, like, okay, what's economic development doing? Is there a way, I just feel like very grateful that our government is accessible and responsive and trying. And I think it's not news to anybody that government moves slowly. It does, and that's frustrating sometimes, but that I think that we really have leaders whose hearts are in the right places and who are committed to good things happening in town. The same is true for the county, because now that we have this site, we're in the county and we're in the village of Agua Fria. And so our county commissioner, I just had to present about this Full Circle Farm project to the Board of County Commissioners, and they unanimously approved the next 3-year lease. So that was very exciting to just, like, yeah, everybody, and this is how I feel, I guess, about land and food, is like kind of across party lines, everybody can connect around food. And caring for the land that we live on. So great, yeah, great relationships with them. We've worked with like the planning, the county planners and commission, and yeah, we just feel really, really lucky. Our leadership is with it. They're like hip. I see another question. How might some of Indigenous farming techniques be applied at Las Golondrinas to expand the coalition and food security? This is a great question. And I would love to work with them. And not that I specifically, but like, because it's not appropriate for me to try to teach Indigenous farming techniques. But I know that YouthWorks has a relationship with Las Golondrinas and uses their kitchen and does like food for their festivals and such. And they've been in touch about like, maybe we could work together on the land here. They've got beautiful farmland in the Sequia. And I think it's just a matter of kind of the internal goals at Las Golondrinas. So if you're like a volunteer or a board member or staff member there, I think like we'd love to, whether that's helping make an introduction or however we can support. But I think that's a great opportunity, and I love Las Golondrinas. And my kids love it. Like we're at every festival, and I just think it's beautiful. So that would be another like layer of, I think my understanding at least is that most of the food they're already growing, they are donating. And so just adding in those layers of traditional Indigenous ag techniques would be really cool.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, Dennis, did you want to add anything or ask anything?
No, I just think it's such a wonderful project, and thank you so much for doing so much for so many people. There's so many opportunities for volunteers and all the projects you're doing, and I just want to thank you very much, Juliana.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had no idea about any of this. I'm looking forward to coming out to the farm stand.
Excellent. Yes, please. April 30th, we'll be opening up. So I look forward to seeing you all. And please, I'll put my, let's see, all panelists and attendees. Let me just put my email in here. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you want to plan a group
There's
tour.
a new message here.
Come volunteer. We would love that.
Okay, great. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Being in touch.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay.